Hello, great ones. Welcome to the Live and Be Great podcast. I'm your host, Latanya Sampson McDonald. I am a life coach and a registered marriage and family therapist associate. And this podcast was created to motivate, educate, and inspire all to live and be great. On today's episode, I wanted to share with you all one of my YouTube comeback videos. Yes, I'm coming back to YouTube. This is a review of the Janet Jackson documentary. Okay? Enjoy. Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Latanya Sampson McDonald. I'm a registered associate marriage and family therapist, and I'm also a life coach. So, the Janet Jackson documentary. First of all, long overdue. Okay, long overdue. Love Janet, huge fan of the Jacksons. And as I looked at the documentary, where I'm at now versus where I was back then, I honestly probably would have had a different take on what I was seeing. I probably would have just been grateful to see that she was finally able to tell her side of the story. But as a therapist and working with the populations that I've worked with, going through my own trials and tribulations here on this earth in this Black body as a woman, gotta look at it a tad bit differently. I have to look at it deeper. And the title of the video was basically, how I felt. Like, did you become Janet Jackson because of your father, Joe Jackson, or in spite of? And I'm leaning more towards in spite of versus the dangerous notion that his children had to go through all of that abuse to become who they were. I don't believe that. Not for a second, especially especially the fact that they actually didn't soar the way that they did until they fired their father. Right? But I think when it comes to the Jacksons as a whole, and especially Michael and Janet, the part that they probably did not have the, I would say, the education to know or the circumstance to understand that it was important to not just, I would say, excuse the abuse like we often do in the Black community because it comes from our parents. In fact, that is the worst place for it to come. And on this channel, if you haven't seen my videos before, if you haven't seen me on TikTok or my podcast, and particularly for the YouTube channel, the Corporal Punishment Conference, y'all already know my stance on that. Hitting your children is violent, it's unnecessary, right? I don't go back and forth with people that say disciplining and spanking is different. It's not. It's the same thing because you have to hit your child and make sure it hurts in order to get your point across. So it's violent, and just about every humane society organization that deals with children and the betterment of children and their health and their safety, every professional organization is against hitting your child, spanking, corporal punishment, every last one of them, okay, based off of years and years of research. So with this channel, like, I understand a lot of people have normalized their trauma, but I'm trying to teach y'all something different, okay? because yeah, back in the day before I had my knowledge and I went through my work and I did the healing that I needed to do for myself, I would probably been right there with everybody else, but I'm not. And I have no reason to hold that back and keep that to myself because I do believe that you got to know the truth. You have to educate yourself. And some people, they just don't know any better, right? After you've watched this video, you're going to know better. If you see any of my content, you're going to know better. And that's because I want to share that information and I want better for the community. I want better for the people who go through the process of healing. They still got to live with unhealed people, right? Um, that's what I want. And I think that's what we should all want. But in order to get there, we gotta tell the truth. Okay? So I I think it's in spite of, right? And there were things that were not said based off of our programming. And when I look at Janet and really all of the Jacksons, they sound exactly like my domestic violence victims, which I believe two of them have cases of domestic abuse against their wives or their partners. So the stuff that wasn't said, I think I grapple with this because I do see the Jackson children as victims. Um, During this time, before I even watched the Janet interview, I went back to the Latoya interview, which is here on YouTube. She did several interviews and she detailed the abuse. And based off of what I've seen from abuse victims that I've worked with, I didn't see no lies. I just didn't. Not a one. Um, Especially even fast forwarding to how, they're in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, they still have that sort of um, beaten down, um, scary, pulled back type of language, right? They do. And they've had it this whole entire time. Okay. And I think to not have the conversation, I believe that puts more people in harm's way. Like when Janet would say that her parents were old school, right? And that she felt as though she took a quote about tyranny and how it's not tyranny if it includes love. But I want to teach you all something. That's usually why people stay in toxic relationships, right? Your first relationship is with your parents, and they basically, based off of what they do, when it comes to hitting their children and then mixing with oh, it's because I love you, that's the same type of mentality that domestic violence abusers will use, that they've seen their parents use, and so on and so forth. Like that that sort of triggers in the brain that, okay, if this is happening to me, it's because I deserve it, right? Or I did something to deserve this. I did something wrong. So you essentially teach your children how to endure unnecessary pain, right? And it's the love. They look at the good times. Oh, they love me. They just get a little angry. They look at the good times. And I feel like Catherine Jackson was extremely negligent, but I'm pretty sure her staying with Joe Jackson had something to do with her own childhood and what she went through. And even I'm going to go ahead and talk about Joe Jackson, his childhood, and what he went through and having to be so violent. And in no shape or form did the Jacksons ever say that their parents didn't beat them. Okay, I think they were very clear about that. But I think when we negate the fact that it was actually abuse that they went through is where it becomes dangerous to other victims. It becomes a dangerous thing to say when it comes to those children who can't defend themselves and can't articulate themselves, that can't fight back, right? I think that is very dangerous. And I think, oh my goodness, after the Jacksons came out and knowing how they like to call it strict, okay, knowing how bad it got, like, y'all don't know. I don't think we know how many families actually went that route with being super um abusive, because I'm gonna call it what it is. Y'all want to call it old, other people want to call it being old school, but mm-mm, I don't think it was right. I don't think it was right, and I want to have more conversations like this and more dialogue when it comes to watching and going back and understanding the stories, like, because we're in a time where we're going back to the 90s or a time before the 90s and so on and so on. And even in media, right, people notice that certain things that would fly back then can't fly now. And is the reason is because we're starting to educate ourselves more on what trauma is. And the reason why it's important to talk about what trauma is, even though a lot of it has been normalized, what sexism is or racism is, all of this, right? Mental health. The reason why we need to do that is because the stuff can be stopped, the stuff can be altered, right? If you are honest, okay, about what happened to you and you do the work, right? Even if the stuff you normalized, if you go to therapy, a therapist can point that out for you, even the stuff that you normalized that still affect your life today. And I don't know who can't look at that documentary and can't see that the trauma that they endured as children doesn't affect them still today. I don't know who. Like, I don't know who can't tell, right? When it comes to their relationships, when it comes to how Michael died, you know? I mean, well, some say it was murdered, some say it was suicide, like it was negligent, right? A lot of these celebrities, not just the Jacksons, like Whitney Houston, Bobby Christina, like, my goodness, even when I do the next documentary, my view is what I want you guys to understand is that abusers, they're only repeating what happened to them. When I get them in my office and I actually talk to the ones who have been abused and the ones that do abuse, it's taught. They don't just wake up like that, right? They don't just wake up and decide to inflict violence on people or to let people take advantage of them and things of that nature. Like, they don't just do that. Okay. Um, I want to say another thing that got on my nerves was when her stylist kept saying that Janet never played the victim card. I think that is very toxic, vile, and irresponsible to use that sort of term when it comes to the amount of trauma that she endured in her being the youngest. Usually the elder ones go through even worse than the youngest does. And people would like to say, but they still love their parents. You're going to, but it's still connected to that abusive domestic violence relationship. They still believe that the person that's beating them loves them, right? Because they've shown them this, that, and other, but it's not necessarily true. I don't think it is, right? And anybody can have their opinion on that, whether an abuser or a parent that hits or is negligent with their children loves them. Y'all can have that debate, but it doesn't seem like it does, because I don't think a parent that truly, I would say, first off, loves themselves could commit that act of violence onto someone that came from them. I don't think so, because it's also an indication of how you view yourself and how you treat yourself, right? They talked about how, you know, notice they got majority of them got nose jobs, right? And they would talk about how, Michael was teased because he was the first one to get the nose job, but Michael was teased and was called Big Nose and all sorts of stuff by Joe, right? By their own father. But that played a role in his gender dysphoria. And I'm not ready yet. Maybe a few years from now, we'll get into, you know, Michael. Not ready yet, because that part is very traumatic for me. Just like this, after this video, I'm gonna talk about the Bill Cosby situation. It's very traumatic. Okay, not quite ready to face that yet, but based off of what Latoya has said and what Michael has said himself, and what I would say people who work with the family have said, piecing together their stories, even if they're not telling the whole thing, even based off of the little bit that they've been brave enough to say, hmm, there's a lot to unpack there, and it would make sense. It just would, based off of the abuse that they endured, right? If that is true, allegedly, okay? If this is true, if the details are accurate, but I'm telling you right now, their behavior, like I said, even now, it looks like people who have endured a great deal of abuse, no matter how famous they became, right? Because it's not just it. That's not all that life is. It really isn't, you know? And yeah, you can say, I've excelled and my father, okay, brought out my talents, but the abuse, I still believe it was unnecessary. It just was. I'm like, look at the toxic relationships that Janet was in. I'm happy that she was able to leave, because uh also that separation from that abusive parents, that's usually the first step to where you start to see certain patterns and certain things. Like, I'm pretty sure, even though she's a very private person, I'm pretty sure she also did not quite admire her mother and father's relationship. I don't think actually none of the Jackson children would look back and say they loved their parents' relationships, because based off of Latoya's interview, he probably hit her too, hit Catherine too. Very abusive to his wife as well, not just the children. Um, so I think I saw a lot of disassociation, right, with Janet as well, when it comes to her not telling the whole full situation, that you also see in victims that have experienced a lot of abuse. Like, they will forget or have this sort of amnesia when it comes to the details of traumatic events. Um, I think also the Black community when a parent has, first of all, they have a lot of, we have a lot of reverence. I don't even think just in the Black community, we have a lot of reverence for our parents in general, and we have this need to protect them. But I think that also translate as it also translates into why the culture of protecting abusers is this sort of romanticized situation. Like, we don't just believe victims. There always has to be, what if this person is innocent, and blaming the victim type of mentality. So, a lot of people, when it comes to talking about their trauma, if they haven't gone to therapy, um, they'll go back into their shell and just, okay, well, if big mama say that we ain't supposed to talk about this, we're not going to talk about it. Okay, that's an issue. um I'm trying to think what else. What else did I see that I did not like, uh or that I want to talk about that's deeper? Like, she is amazing. She's amazing, but I don't want I want people to stop subscribing to the mentality that for greatness you got to be abused, especially when it comes to Black people. Like, that's that white supremacy ringing through, and that slave mentality that I got to beat you down in order for you to rise up. It's I don't think it's necessary, you know? I just don't. It's because you're left with the trauma. You're left with not being fulfilled. You're left with feeling like something was taken away from you, anyways. Okay. And then when we train our children not to say anything about it, I think I am happy that even the little bits of what the Jacksons gave us about their story and about the abuse they endured is great. It's a step in the right directions, but we have to talk more, and we got to dive a bit deeper and tell the truth. Okay. And I hate how Latoya was treated. There was very little mention of her. Okay. In the documentary, she's still alive and well. And I think based off of the disconnect when it comes to the siblings, and back in the day, there was an interview where Janet, called Latoya a liar. I don't think she was lying. I don't think that was, I think without repairing with that and having that conversation about Latoya and them completely leaving that out of the documentary tells more truth. I just do. Right? Because you can't even get Latoya on there to say that, okay, everything I said was a lie, because it wasn't. And deep down, I feel like Janet and her people and the rest of those siblings, they're just protecting. They're protecting their parents. Because you are going to ask why. You are going to look at Catherine like, why didn't you protect your kids from him? Why you kept having kids? Because like, please believe he didn't wait till Latoya or Janet, based off of what Latoya said, he was abusing um Reby, the eldest, the firstborn. So, like, that's how it continues, right? That's why you have to talk about it. I'm not saying that every last person has to broadcast their family secrets to the world. But if you're in the public, it does do a bit of disservice, because our culture is a following type of culture. It's a motivational, I need to find inspiration from this person, that person. Like, that's just how we work as humans, right? When we're trying to figure ourselves out, we look for inspiration, and a lot of our inspiration is drawn towards celebrities and movies and music and whoever is out there in the forefront. and we use it as a relatable type of talking point when it comes to other people and finding other people that are like you. That's what the majority does. So when we don't have conversations about it, like it just does a detriment because now it's that missing piece that people need to work on, right? It wasn't enough for Michael to just say that he was deathly afraid. Okay, why? Which he shared why, but also the next piece is to heal from it. And I know like that has to be difficult as a celebrity because you don't know who you can trust. But for your information, confidential, confidentiality. Therapists cannot break confidentiality. Even life coaches can't break confidentiality, right? But based off of the trauma they endured and not really knowing how to form really good relationships and not knowing who they can trust and just overall never addressing that trauma and doing the work and just getting up, pushing through and performing, that did a disservice to them. And that's the piece that they're missing. Okay. And I hope while they're here, the ones that are still alive, like that they do find that safe space. And I hope people who have looked up to them, that know their story, don't just fall into the blind, leading the blind. Okay. When it comes to the things that we don't talk about, because the things we don't talk about, I guarantee you, is probably behind why your relationships are the way that they are. Okay, why you are afraid to take risk, why you may be impulsive, why you may not believe in yourself. Um, like all of it can be worked on, it can be healed, it can be repaired, but you have to acknowledge it first and tell the whole truth. Okay. Is there anything else about that documentary? Oh, it's so much. It's like, it's really so much. Like, cheaters. Cheaters also, based off of what I've seen, they do not love themselves, low self esteem, and yeah, can be very narcissistic. Um, and also, it a lot of them tend to have, like the majority of them, based off the clients I've had, do have a history of sexual trauma. The men definitely do have a history, and the women, but the men for sure, because that's usually where it will lie when it comes to the infidelity. I think women just more, not saying that women don't cheat, but based off of what I've seen and what I've worked with, and yeah, sexual abuse there. Um, like I said earlier, abusers repeat what they've seen. Um, and also when it comes to drug use, right? Because I was talking about cheating when it came to Joe Jackson and Jermaine Dupri and probably some of the Jackson brothers as well. Okay, when it comes to cheating based off of what's been put out there allegedly. Um, Also, drug abuse. People usually turn to drugs because they don't want to feel what they're feeling right now. Okay. And I know based off of the trauma industry, I'm talking about the trauma industry, based off of the entertainment industry, I think I did something there. Based off of the entertainment industry, there's a lot of trauma. There's a lot of pretend to get the bag. Okay. We don't have time for you to feel nothing. Get what you need to get done and get the bag. But when it comes to drugs, people just a lot of times when they become addicted is because they're addicted to not having to feel what they're feeling, to not have to address that trauma, to sort of let me put the band-aid on this, cover it up, put some makeup on it, and keep moving, you know, that part. because of what they do have to face is too painful, and they don't have the support that they need, or they don't feel like it's going to work, or they don't deserve it, they fall into addiction. That's another situation that we sort of brush past, and that we've been irresponsible when it comes to talking about it. Like, we'll just say, oh, they have demons, or, you know, they were living the fast life, or whatever the case may be, but not getting down to the root of why that person picked up that drug. That part, that part we need to have more conversations about. Okay. Um, yeah, I think it's a very, I think the Jackson children, based off of their status, it's a very lonely place to be. Um, Lonely place to be, and them not really knowing, like I said, who to trust, and just going off the basis of how things have been done over the years in our communities, especially the Black communities, the generational trauma that we ignore, the, oh, my parents did the best that they could, and I feel guilty for even acknowledging that everything they did wasn't right. And I just quickly brush it past, well, they love me. And I really don't believe that's true. I don't know. What do you guys think, right? Comment below. Like, do you really feel like your parents love themselves based off of their behavior towards you? Um, how do you justify that type of violence towards your kids? Because you gotta get, if we're being honest, you gotta get a certain amount of angry to want to hit your kids. Um, when it comes to Joe Jackson, like glorifying, even though like the first sign, the first indicator of that separation from him actually being a father was he told his children to call him Joseph. They couldn't call him dad. They couldn't, right? So that's already a separation when it comes to that abuse, right? Like, don't even, like, I'm Joseph to you, okay? Like, that's already a trait of toxicity and lack of accountability, you know? And I don't think I ever seen Joe apologize for what he did, because everybody praised him for the children, for how they turned out. And like I said, I'm leaning on they turned out that way in spite of him not being a father to him. He was more of a manager, and they still fired him. So what does that tell you? What does that tell you? Like, it was very, very driven by his ego and getting the accolades and getting the praise for them being his children. Um, it's very complicated. It's not just one answer to like really figure out this situation, but trauma was definitely involved, and trauma is still running their lives, unfortunately. And it's like, not only did they have to deal with the basics of the childhood trauma, but also the entertainment industry and the scrutiny. Like, that's a lot. That's a lot. That's a lot for them to endure, that most people probably wouldn't understand. Most people probably wouldn't understand. But just because they won't understand doesn't mean that they can't still get help, and that empathy and guidance wouldn't help. I feel like it still would. And I hope that they get that, based off of what, because they shouldn't have had to go through what they went through. None of them, you know? And yes, they need to be accountable for their actions. They definitely do. And I think they have, like, if they have abuse, domestic violence abuse cases, um Yeah. Be accountable. Apologize. Do the work. Change your behavior. That's the best form. That's the best apology, is to change your behavior. But um I think, look at my notes. Mm, yeah, I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say. Like, Janet, amazing. Oh my gosh. Like, who didn't want to be Janet? Without all the other stuff. Like, who wants to? I don't think all the other stuff, like all that abuse and failed relationships and not knowing to trust. But even actually, I hate that they had to go through so much. You know what? Not had to. I would say I hate that they went through so much on top of um not being able to heal or talk about or repair, like just having to push through and still get on stage. Um, yeah, beautiful to see if you didn't really know to pay attention to the story. Amazing artist, but we gotta do better. We do. We do. I can't ignore it. There's always a better way. Cause I've seen it done. I've seen it done. And you got certain celebrities that were child celebrities that did not have to go through that type of abuse from their parents. You do. They exist. Not to say that the entertainment industry probably wasn't full of horrors for them, but there are people that successfully protected their children. Um, and I wish they would talk more about that. But from what it's looking like, the majority, horrors on top of horrors. Horrors on top of horrors. And we gotta do better. Gotta tell the truth, gotta talk about it and heal from it. Okay? So that's all, folks. I hope you have enjoyed this reaction. The next one will be on We Gotta Talk About Bill. Oh, yeah. And hope you guys enjoy. Whether you don't enjoy it or not, comment below. I'm going to read them and answer them as best as I can while I return back to YouTube. Yeah. Thank you for watching. Like, share, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
The Live and Be Great podcast will be airing every other Friday. If you have truly enjoyed this podcast, thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for giving Live and Be Great a chance. Please feel free to share, like, give a review, subscribe on whichever platform that you're listening to right now, on iTunes or Apple Podcast, Spotify, Anchor, as well as Google Play. The Live and Be Great podcast is strictly crowdfunded, so if you are interested in becoming a supporter, you can click the link in the description, or you can go to liveandbegreat.com and scroll to the bottom and donate to the Live and Be Great podcast today, so I can continue to give you good and motivational content. Thank you all for listening, and don't forget to give yourself permission to live and be great.